Hi, my name's Alister Benn and you're watching Expressive Photography. In this week's video, I want to show you 5 very compelling reasons why Adobe Lightroom is better than Photoshop. Now, I appreciate that's a very, very bold statement, and for anyone who's an expert at Photoshop, you may well disagree. But for most people, not being able to do something in Adobe Photoshop is a barrier when they could probably do it in Lightroom. So I want to look at all the different reasons why staying in Adobe Lightroom is actually going to be better for your creativity, better for your expressive articulation, and making you a better and happier photographer and a more productive photographer. So the first reason that I want to cover is that in Adobe Lightroom, you're dealing in a non-destructive environment. If you are using RAW files, which you should be, if you want to get the most out of your camera, then being in Adobe Lightroom is you're staying in the RAW file. You're making all of your adjustments to the original file, but they're not carved in stone. You can undo them and you're not affecting that raw data in any shape or form. You're dealing in the most non-destructive environment, and that has to be a big positive. The second reason that I think Adobe Lightroom is better than Adobe Photoshop is that Lightroom is designed for photography. It is absolutely 100% focused on photography. Most of the tools in Adobe Photoshop we don't actually use because they're used for all sorts of different graphic design or three-dimensional things. So at the end of the day, staying in Adobe Lightroom is where photography is meant to be. Of course, there may be some things that we do have to use Photoshop for, and I will make a video in a week or two's time talking about the things that we have to use Adobe Photoshop for as landscape photographers. But Lightroom has been designed from the ground up to be the home of your photography, and that is why we have the library module and the develop module and the printing modules, so that you can basically stay in Adobe Lightroom from start to finish. It is a library. It shows you all your photos. You can organize them. You can move them around various hard drives. You can export them to all sorts of different places. It is built for photography. The next reason is that you can very quickly determine the mood and the feel of your photography. If we take this photograph into the develop module, you can see how quickly I can adjust the exposure, which changes the mood. I can open up the shadows to make it feel more open and more expressively high key. I can desaturate it or increase the saturation, decrease the saturation. We can change the feel all the time very, very quickly. Being able to change temperature, tint, exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, black points, white points, texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance and saturation all in one panel, and being able to reset it with one click is an incredibly powerful way to understand what the photograph wants you to do. And of course, because I have all of these history states, I can slip back and forward between them at any point in time. This takes me on to the next point, which is that the history states and the snapshots are saved with the file. It doesn't matter if I close Lightroom and go off for a run or go away for a 3-month photo trip to the Arctic. I get back and my history states and snapshots will be here when I open this image again in the future. This is very different from Adobe Photoshop, where the history states are not saved when you close the file and you have lost all of those different steps. You no longer have access to them. You can see as I move the mouse up and down that there's a preview window up here. Any one of these snapshots, so convert to black and white, I can create a snapshot, and that is now something that I can go back to at any point in time. I have various other versions that I have saved, and I can even go back to the raw file to see what it was at the start. It's also very, very handy to be able to look at the raw file and the version that I'm working on in the same window at the same time. being able to turn off the lights and just not be distracted by anything else except the photograph is another great thing. The next point I want to cover is the ability to move settings from one image to another. This is particularly useful when we have panoramic photographs, and if I open up one of them with all of the 9 images selected, I can very quickly come in and, let's say, make some adjustments. So I want to make that a bit brighter, maybe cool it down a little bit. I can even come in detail and do some noise reduction, get rid of all the color noise, push that up quite far. Every adjustment that I make, I can do here. Let's cool that a bit more. I like that coolness. And my lens corrections to get rid of some of that vignetting. And when I go back into my library module, you will see, and because I'm recording at the same time, it's a little slower than normal. Now I have 9 images there that all have exactly the same settings. So I can just right click on them and do photo merge into panorama, and that makes my panoramic image all in one place. If I want to change that, nice and easy, I can just select all 9 again, click on any of the other photos, go back in. It's one of those very fluid and easy things to do, but it is so important. It's just an incredibly important part of the power and ease of use of Adobe Lightroom. The last one I want to talk about is what is considered a very advanced technique. It's one of the reasons people use Photoshop, and it's one of the reasons that people think that using Photoshop is the best way to process their photographs. And that is the point about luminosity masks. Luminosity masks became a really huge thing in about 2010 and have really become a massive part of processing, being able to make very selective adjustments using very, very small parameters, either color or zones. This is now built directly into Adobe Lightroom, and I use it pretty much all the time. Being able to do this in Lightroom, again, we're in a non-destructive environment. We can make all sorts of snapshots. We can undo things. We can compare the likes before and after very, very quickly. So all of the things that we've discussed so far, we can use in collaboration with things like luminosity masks. So I'm going to determine the mood of this photograph very, very quickly. So I'm going to make it a little bit more punchy. It had been raining, so everything was quite saturated. One of the things I really loved about this scene was the way the light was catching the kind of Scots pine tree here in the middle, this beautiful sort of highlighted light. And if I want to just come in and use the color range to select those brighter tones, and I can zone in with how much accuracy I want, which tones are going to, because obviously I can expand it and get more tones highlighted. But if I just want to capture those beautiful warm tones, I can actually make them a little warmer. I can increase their luminosity. I can increase a little bit of detail in there. I can increase their saturation. And more importantly, I can actually change their hue so that I can move them from where they were in the sort of yellow into slightly more orange. And what that's done, if I just turn that adjustment on and off, is I've used a luminosity mask based on that color to select just those tones to create this beautiful Scots pine tree in the middle of this composition. This is something that 15 years ago you would have had to go into Photoshop for. And this is one of my big concerns these days. There's a lot of the teaching that's being done, particularly for beginner and intermediate photographers, is based on techniques that were being used 15 or 20 years ago when Lightroom wasn't very good. We had to use Photoshop because this is the only place that these tools were available. Now we have them in Adobe Lightroom. Now we can stay in this raw, non-destructive environment. We can also compare side by side the before and after, so we can very easily see what we've done. We can make snapshots and compare them. We can make virtual copies and process images in different ways and have them side by side. Adobe Lightroom was designed and has become this massively powerful workplace to process photographs. Photoshop is still being developed for other things except photography. The fact that it has photo in the name is a somewhat misleading. Yes, I still go into Adobe Photoshop for certain things, and you can stay tuned to the channel for another video that will be coming either next week or the week after, looking at when I go into Photoshop. What do I use Photoshop for? And these are things that I cannot do in Adobe Lightroom. I process 95% of my images 100% in Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop at all. And part of the reason for that is I want my creativity to flow. I want to have my pen or my tablet or a mouse and keyboard and just allow my creativity to flow into the images and make the adjustments in the easiest, most straightforward, simple, quick way. I don't want to spend 3 hours in Photoshop using 29 million layers when I can work with a raw file in Adobe Lightroom. It's quicker, more efficient, easier interface, easier to use, and hopefully the points that I've raised today are convincing enough for you to spend more time in Adobe Lightroom and not go into a more complicated, more less intuitive environment just because you think you have to. This is where the creativity comes from. Let's use the tool that's going to make it the easiest for us to do. Of course, you're entitled to disagree with this video, in my opinion. It is just my opinion. I've only been doing this for 25 years, so I guess I'm still learning. And at the end of the day, if you disagree, then jump into the comments and tell me. I'm happy to read your comments and I'm happy to reply. Please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. It's very much appreciated, and I look forward to bringing more content to you on a regular basis. And don't forget that midweek, Adam Gibbs and I are critiquing your photographs and giving our feedback on what we think could change or be made better, or even what the photograph is saying to us. Also, the Out of Darkness book is still on the pre-sale and you can grab a copy, and we are still offering free shipping to the United States, the UK, and quite a few countries in Europe. We're subsidizing the shipping to try and make the book more affordable for you over there. Thanks for watching. Tune in again every week for more expressive photography content, and I look forward to talking to you again. Bye for now.